Hi, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be looking at putting together a serial effect track, a multi-effect track, basically with a series of effects in sequence, and grouping them all together, giving them some controls, and exploring what sounds are possible with them. It's quite a classic effects track. We've got a drive, we have some flanging effects and delay, reverb, etc. It's really just to explain how these things to put together, especially if you're not sure. Let's have a look what we have then. We have analog playing a simple sawtooth wave here, nothing special going on, one oscillator. In the rack we have various effects. We can go through them very quickly. We have the possibility to drive the sound. Bad drive. We have ring mod, which we can add in here. We introduce the ring mod, the 100%. We can also modulate the ring mod here using the LFO. Let's go to here, ring mod LFO amount. So we can manipulate that if we want to. Reduce that a little bit. We also have, turn the drive down, we have here a phaser flanger effect, which we have also LFO control, but let's introduce it to begin with. We have the feedback here. This can also be affected here by the LFO. Same LFO, it's a combination. This LFO affects both the ring mod and the phaser flanger. We can also change the mode. I believe if we go here we have the doubler effect. Let's have a look. We can have the doubler. We go here, we just have the flanger. And finally, in the first position, we go to the phaser. Now, we are limited, of course, in this rack to the number of macros we have, so if we wanted to change any of the additional controls within any of these effects, then we'd have to go into them and manipulate them. But this gives you an overview. Anyway, so we have that, the flanger effect here. We also have here, let's turn that off, this might change here. We have a delay. You can have a look at that. These are all standard effects within Ableton, nothing special, nothing that requires any of the higher versions. Here we can adjust feedback, the dry wet. And then finally, we have a reverb, standard reverb here, which we can also adjust the decay, time, and the size. Now, at the end of the rack, we have a limiter, just in case we have any sort of extreme frequencies that we can keep control of those. And then we have here a compressor as well. Down, let's put some drive on here, which is positioned in the chain after the overdrive and the flanger. Of course, this is just preference, you could put it where you want. And so we can compress the signal, maybe put some so we can add compression to this. Let's go to town a little bit, see what we get. Okay, I think that's understandable. Turn these down again. So we have control over these things. We can combine them as we wish if we we want delay, we can add it, reverb, etc. One final thing I did was to give us the ability to randomize some of these macros. I always find that's quite a useful function for exploring sound. Sometimes you get complete junk, sometimes you get something interesting. We'll look at this more in the build, but some of these are excluded. I don't have the compressor randomized, also the reverb, and I believe the delay. Those two are not randomized. We'll have a look at that more in the build. So I've excluded some because we don't want, you know, excessive compression or whatever. We just want to set these levels, what we want, and then come to them. Okay, I can give you some examples maybe. Here inside the rack I've created a few presets. You can also of course go into your instrument. Remember, this is simply just this tone. And explore further with the instrument. You don't have to have analog here. You saw in the intro I was using a sample. I'm just using analog just as demonstration. Put any sound source you want in front of this. What else do we have? Let's try this. Okay, I think you get the idea. Let's have a look how this is all put together. As I say, we have pitch shifter, overdrive, phaser, flanger, compressor, delay, reverb and limiter making up this rack. Let's have a look how it's put together. The first thing you're going to need is in your audio effects and audio effect rack. You can just drag that in here. If you click this icon, you can get your macros. I've kept my original names. The plus opens up to give you the 16 macros. Now, we just need to drop in the effects we're going to be using. The first one was the shifter. Let's drop that in there. Then we have an overdrive, I believe, overdrive. Close this up. The phaser flanger here. Our compressor, delay and reverb, and then finally on the end of everything is a limiter, just in case we have any excessive volume levels, that'll catch them. Right, okay, now we can set up the shifter very quickly. We need to switch to ring modulation, and with our phaser flanger we need to switch to hertz here so that this matches the LFO on the shifter, because we'll be using a common macro control for this one and this one. Okay, so those two are done. Now we can go in and do our mapping. Let's click here, we get the mapping up. We want to map here the shifter course to macro 1. Then we have the LFO rate, which is this here, we can map here. The ring modulation LFO amount. Then finally the ring modulation dry wet here. That one's done. Then we have the overdrive, and we want to map the drive here to drive. And now we're going to come out of here very quickly, and I'm using a little trick here. We're going to open this here, which is the chain, and we're going to map this volume level here also to the drive control. There we go. So we'll come to that in a minute, but effectively what I'm doing is as we increase drive, we reduce the overall volume of the rack. There wasn't enough macros to have an additional volume control, so I've used a workaround here, increase drive, and we lower the volume of the rack. Okay, but we'll come to that in a second. We need to set that up when we do our constraints. We can close that again now. Then we have the phaser flanger. Now we want to have click here on the phase, and that gives us the mode. We have the frequency, which is sharing this LFO. The amount, phase LFO amount here, and the feedback. Finally, the dry wet level. Next is the compressor, which we need to come out of the mapping again. I forgot this one. We need to set this to peak. I set it to peak. You set a compressor up how you want. I had it on peak, and I'm controlling here the threshold level with the compressor threshold. Then what else do we have? The delay. This one's very simple. It's the sync. I'm synchronized here, so I'm using sync. I'm using the rate here, mapping this, the feedback, delay feedback, and the dry wet. Delay dry wet. Finally, we have our reverb, which is, we'll start with the dry wet. Take then the decay time and the size. Okay, so now all we have to do, I think that's everything set up. We just need to go in and set some constraints here. They're really just based around a couple of things. One is the feedback, the phaser feedback. I'll reduce that to 90 because we will be randomizing using the randomize function, so we want to not have excessive feedback. Same with the delay feedback, I've set that to 90. Then we need to go here into our drive, and we need to set this one here, the maximum drive, to 75. I set that, I limited that. And this one I set at 0. This is the little trick with the drive control. I set this to 0, and this I set to minus 5.6, I believe. So when we now operate this, I'll show you on the chain, we'll see that the volume, as I increase this, the volume is decreasing here and increases as I reduce the drive. Okay, so that's the little trick there. Let's go back into the mapping again. Is there one more setting we have? The compressor threshold I actually set to 0 here, so that we can just reduce, not increase as well. Okay, I think that's everything. So if we're, let's do a, oh yes, one more thing. Right click, exclude macro from randomization. You can do that on the threshold here, on the reverb, I did that, and on the delay, dry, wet. So those three are excluded from the randomization. So this is 0. Let's just do a random value, see what happens. We'll find out now what's happened. Let me reintroduce this. Okay, so it seems to be working. You save your rack here, click that, you'll find it in your user library under audio effects racks, presets, audio effects racks, it'll be in there. Yeah, as always, hope this is useful. Enjoy your day. I'll leave the macro values up here at the end as a screenshot. You can grab those at the end of the video. Take care, and see you in the next one, hopefully. Thank you.